We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and this book is guaranteed to ruffle a few feathers in certain communities. This book was found in the public domain, public access, and no copyright infringement or breach was intentional. We bring it to all for re-educational purposes alone. It's titled Bible Defences of Slavery, or The Origin, History and Fortune of the Negro Race as Deduced from History, both sacred and profane, their natural relations, moral, mental and physical, to the other races of mankind, compared and illustrated, their future destiny predicted, etc. by Josiah Priest, who was born 1788 and fortunately died in 1851. Yay! Publication date 1851. Topic: slavery, black race slavery. And it's in English. First published in 1843 under the slavery as it relates to the Negro African race. We found this in the public domain, public access, and no copyright breach was intentional, and we just brought it to all for re-educational purposes alone. And there's a lot of reviews here, and this one caught our eye. It's probably from a Hebrew Israelite, as you'll soon realise. Subject: Negroes are the true Israelites. No one will buy them, means no one can save them out of their current condition at their particular era in their slave days, American slave trade. The curses in Deuteronomy 28. They require a divine intervention and will only be saved by Jesus when he returns for them and those spiritually grafted in through the seed Jesus, Deuteronomy 30. So they're saying, yeah, you'd never be saved as a slave in those days, American slave trade, until Jesus came back. Well, we think that's a load of rubbish. They're taking Deuteronomy out of concept, way out of context, and then they say Jesus was black, probably basing it on Revelations 1:15 or something like that. Israelites are black, just as the original Egyptians were. Okay, the Egyptians, yeah, they are black. They were probably light brown as well. They intermixed, interbred with others that they traded with, the Phoenicians, the Arameans, the Syrians, etc. So they would have been mixed race. To say that Jesus was black is incorrect, because they are going, as we said, by Revelations 1:15, where it doesn't say he was black. Just because he had tan feet like bronze or brass or Lebanese copper, it doesn't make him a black man. Okay. Anybody out there can produce us black copper, black Lebanese copper, black brass, well, send us some pictures. Okay, we're talking about African black, not American Negro, light brown black, right? Song of Solomon, they're trying to say that Solomon was black, but it's actually the lady that came from Kedar, his supposed lover or admirer. It's talking about that woman. And she tells this other woman of Solomon's palace, apparently, hey, don't look at me and have a nasty look, etc., because I'm black. Okay, I became dark basically because I had to look after the family, and they made me tend these grapevines or something, the fields, and I got really dark because of the hot sun. Look not upon me because I am black or dark, depends on which translation you read, because the sun hath looked upon me. The sun, beat down on her day after day. Her mother's children were angry with her. Okay? So they made her the keeper of the vineyards. But because she was looking after their vineyards, she couldn't attend to her own. Psalm 69, for your sake I have borne reproach, etc., etc. I've become a stranger, all this sort of stuff. So they're basically trying to verify that the Bible says that Jesus was black, this lady was black, African, all this sort of stuff, right? When Kedar apparently was an Arabic region or something like that, geographical location, as far as we can remember, and all this sort of stuff. And then you've got other reviewers, and it says Adam the man is a racist idiot. Yeah, who's he talking about? Probably someone else further down. Oh, here it goes here. Origin of Man, Genesis chapters 1 and 2. It's my understanding that the author is of Negro descent. This explains why her interpretation of the origins of man was ever slight, and removing the importance of the Adamic Caucasian Hebrew Israelite Greek race, and so forth. And this is why that person calls him an idiot, because this is not actually a lady that wrote it. It was a man, Josiah Priest, born 1788 to 1861, and this guy was an American non-fiction writer of the early 19th century. He wasn't an African Negro or African American or anything like that. His books and pamphlets, which presented both standard and speculative history and archaeology, sold in thousands. Although Priest appears to have been poorly educated, he attempted to portray himself as an authority in his books. Priest is often identified as one of the creators of pseudoscientific, so it's half-assed science. It consists of statements, beliefs, or practices that claim to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. Pseudoscience is often characterized by contradictory, exaggerated claims, right? And pseudohistoric literature, so this is half-assed history as well. Pseudo-history is a form of pseudo-scholarship that attempts to distort or misrepresent the historical record, often by employing methods resembling those used in scholarly historical research. The related term crypto-history is applied. Yeah. Although his work was widely read and several of his works were published in multiple editions, his books were characterized by theories that were used to justify the violent domination over both the Native American, sometimes called American Indians, First Americans, or Indigenous Americans, but apparently the Africans were there before them. There has been videos where an archaeologist looked at these certain rocks and said, "Hey, there's black people on it." And an Indian that was with him said, "Yeah, that's right, but our people wiped them out. They were here first and we wiped them out." And African American peoples. Priest's works were among the most overtly racist, so the guy was a racist. So how could that person be a African Negro or American Negro? Priest's works were among the most overtly racist of his time, and it's a guy, it's not a woman. Priest's works helped set the stage for the Trail of Tears. Some sort of book or something. The forced displacement of approximately 60,000 people of the 5 civilized tribes between 1830 and 1850, and the additional thousands of Native Americans within that were ethnically cleansed by the United States. So they were wiped out deliberately, trying to get rid of them, right? And the defense of slavery that contributed to the conflicts of the American Civil War, because they were adamant, determined, they weren't going to be kicked off their land, so they decided to get up off their butts and do something about it, and they were killed off for that, for not conforming, for rebelling, etc. by the sounds of it. Early life. Priest was born in Unadilla, New York, wherever that is. He grew up during a time when the United States was first establishing itself as a nation. Little specific is known about his schooling, but it is assumed that he received a basic primary and secondary education. At the age of 24, he married Eliza Perry from Lansingburg, New York. Might be related to Katy Perry. She might be related to him. After a brief period in Lansingburg, they migrated to Albany, New York, around the year 1819. While there, Priest was first employed as a coach trimmer or upholsterer. He later worked in leather, mainly fashioning saddles and harnesses. He and Eliza conceived and raised a total of 10 children. Wow, they're a lot of kids. He was reportedly well liked by the churchgoers for his dramatic performance during the sermons, several of which were published. So he's a bit of an actor, a bit of a dramatist. Priest's fundamentalist view of Christianity and his faith of biblical literalism. That's literally true. A term used differently by different authors concerning biblical interpretation. It can equate to the dictionary definition of literalism, adherence to the exact letter or the literal sense. Evident through his work. Josiah Priest knew Oliver Cowdery, an American religious leader. Doesn't he look like Daniel? What's that guy? Oh, he's one of those actors, Last of the Mohicans. He was an American, Daniel Day-Lewis. He was an American religious leader who, with Joseph Smith, was an important participant in the formative period of the Latter-day Saint movement between 1829 and 1836. He was the first baptized Latter-day Saint, probably one of the first three, who later assisted Joseph Smith Jr. in the production of the Book of Mormon. Writing career. Priest decided to give up his profession as a leather worker and become a writer. His first book, in genre now identified as cryptozoology, was The Wonders of Nature and Providence, displayed compiled from authentic sources, both ancient and modern, giving an account of various and strange phenomena existing in nature, of travels, adventures, singular providences, etc. Is that the title of his one book? Oh my gosh, that's long. His other major publications were American Antiquities and Discoveries of the West, and Slavery as it relates to the Negro, 1843, each of which was published in multiple editions. His writing about American prehistory and his comment is not made entirely to be humorous. It might be classified as science fiction or fantasy, as well as a subgenre of American romanticism, the elements of which are pronounced in the early products of popular culture. Winthrop Hillier Duncan writes, this author is thought by some to have been the creator of or forerunner of the popular diamond nickel novels of the 60s, 70s and 80s. Maybe that's in 1860, 70, 80. Here's an illustration from Priest's 1839 book, The Anti-Universalist, or History of the Fallen Angels of the Scriptures, proofs of the being of Satan and of evil spirits, and many other curious matters connected therewith. American Antiquities, 1883. This 400-page publication is centered around Priest's own study of the Bible and antiquarian journals, supplemented by information from his travels. After visiting earthworks in Ohio, whatever that is, in New York, Priest concluded that these mounds could be traced back to a lost race that had inhabited America even before the Native Americans. Okay, so it must be a whole lot of mounds where these people lived in it. Okay, a bit like those, what are they called? Lord of the Rings houses, that type of thing. This idea is now referred to as the mound builder myth and still has supporters in society today. The book grew in popularity because of Priest's views on Native Americans. It tapped into the widely accepted view of those times that Native Americans were merely bloodthirsty savages, bent on the destruction of all but their own race. It was inconceivable to Priest, he's probably talking about Mayans, and like-minded men that a race so lazy and inept could conceive and build such huge, elaborate structures. Priest speculated that the original dwellers could be the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The reasoning Priest gives for this conclusion that there was an even earlier settler than the Native Americans relies upon his own biblical interpretation, so it was his own interpretation of the flood story. And the 10 lost tribes were the 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel that were said to have been exiled from the kingdom of Israel after its conquest by the Neo-Assyrian Empire, or the new or more modern Assyrian Empire, around 722 BCE. These are the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, etc. The reasoning Priest gives for his conclusion that there was an even earlier settler there than the Native Americans relies upon his own biblical interpretation of the flood story. According to Josiah, after the great flood disappeared, Noah and his ark landed on America. Oh my gosh. That's why it's his own interpretation. While surveying the land, Noah also discovered mounds that had been constructed before the waters rose up. Upon seeing this, Noah questioned where these agricultural phenomena came from. Now, where does it say that in the scriptures? Surveying the various themes of mound builder origins, he could not decide whether the mounds were the work of Polynesians or Egyptians. Polynesians. So that would be Polynesians. Could that be Maori, New Zealand Maori, Samoans, Rarotongans, or those sort of people, or Hawaiians maybe. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Greeks, Romans, Israelites, Scandinavians, Welsh, Scots, or Chinese, although he felt certain that Indians had not pulled him. Priest's clear bias against Native Americans probably derives from stories he heard during the American-Indian Wars. Immediately following the American Revolution, Native Americans who were engaged in bloody and violent battles were frequently represented by the dominant culture as savages and threats to peace. Probably they had this hidden motive or agenda to down or depress them so they could get in there and steal their land. Something like that. There must have been some sort of motive behind that. Slavery as it relates to the Negro, 1843. Another work in which Priest uses biblical interpretation as a centre theme is Slavery as it relates to the Negro, or African race, 1843. In this overtly racist book, Priest seeks to use references from the Bible to prove that God created black people to be slaves. Priest claimed that Noah's 3 sons were each a different colour. No, they were all black, according to Hebrew Israelites. But yeah, that's what he claims, that the 3 sons were each a different colour. The black offspring was named Ham. Well, it's actually in the original ancient Tav Estra, Brita Cam, it's got Kham, but it's actually pronounced Ham. Was cursed from birth to be a servant. As a consequence of his sins, all his people would also suffer the fate of slavery. He just did this one thing wrong, and he's cursed for him and his descendants. He walked in and he saw his father naked after he got drunk on his wine that he made from his vineyard that he planted. He was wasted, and he went into his tent, lay down, had no clothes on, and he walked in. Oh! And he walked out, didn't bother covering him, and he told his brothers, who went in backwards with a cape or cloak or whatever covering him, and he put it on top of him, and he wakes up and he goes, "Cursed!" Yeah? So it's a curse from him. Okay, cursed are your son, will your son be? They'll be servants of my other sons. All this sort of stuff, right? So it's not God cursing him. It could be God responsible, speaking through Noah, and the curse applies. But if you read the scriptures, it's actually Noah cursing that son for seeing him in all his glory, his nakedness, and not doing anything about it, covering him up, right, to save him embarrassment. Whereas the other sons used their brains and went in there backwards and covered him with a cloak. Yeah. Could have frozen to death. But yeah, so he curses him for his not covering him. Priest writes, the appointment of this race of men to servitude and slavery was a judicial act of God. So these American slave traders, the slave owners, try to base their right to make these black people slaves because of that particular scripture, right? They took it out of context. They twisted it. So that gave them all that religious right to do that. As a consequence of his sins, all his people would also suffer the fate of slavery. Priest writes, the appointment of this race of men to servitude and slavery was a judicial act of God, or in other words, was a divine judgment. Multiple revised editions of this book were republished in the 1850s under the title Bible Defense of Slavery, or The Origin, History and Fortune of the Negro Race. Priest provides 3 pieces of evidence for why the Bible justifies the enslavement of black people. He says that the blacks were created with lower intelligence. It's like Christian identity, saying, God created the beasts of the fields, and that's all those races, mixed races. They're not the supreme race that we are, etc., etc. They are lower than us. They were those animals, or animal-like beasts of the field, or this sort of rubbish. Priest provides 3 pieces of evidence for why the Bible justifies the enslavement of black people. He says that the blacks were created with lower intelligence. Now that's racist, and more irrational behaviour than other colours of man, suiting them as servants. He cites a verse in the book of Genesis that states that Ham and all of his descendants were destined to be slaves. He argues that they were servants, not slaves. Servants. There's a difference in the scriptures between servants, especially Jewish servants, and foreigners that were captured through war, became slaves. There was a different treatment. They weren't slaves as in African Negroes, American Negroes being slaves. Servants had privileges. They could work in this house for this person, maybe they're their parent or something, or maybe they were in debt, so they paid it off, they worked it off, paid it off, but they had privileges like a bed to sleep in, a roof over their head, food to eat, water to drink, clothing, all this sort of stuff, so they had pretty good comfort, whereas a slave, a foreigner, a non-Jew, a Gentile, a Goy, or the Goyim, captured as a result of war, were treated as the American Negro, African Negro slaves were. They had no rights, they had nothing. Okay? People need to look at the scriptures properly and see the difference. Okay, these scriptures where Paul says we are slaves of the Christ, is meaning that basically you're servants. Your whole being is Christ orientated, right? Okay, you're a servant, a slave in that sense, not a slave like, well, you got to live outside in the mud, get booted, get treated badly, all that sort of stuff, chained up, whipped and beaten, all this sort of stuff, as the African American Negroes in that slave trade went through and suffered. He states that Ham and all his descendants were destined to be slaves. He argued that due to the blacks' inferior attributes, they possessed a need to be enslaved. One of fears a believer that they had a smaller skull or something like that, or that sort of rubbish. His book discusses how a black man's physical stature and skin, as opposed to those of a white man, are designed to be more durable and therefore intended for hard manual labour. It's more endurable for the heat in its geographical location. Egypt, parts of Africa, where the sun just beats down on you constantly, their skin evolved. It had to evolve so it could handle it, or else they'd get some sort of skin disease. It happens over time, right? Not overnight. Pamphlets and historical profiles. In addition to his books, Priest wrote several pamphlets focusing on heroes of the American Revolution. And they'll all be white, right? His narratives suggest a preoccupation with racial conflicts, since they focused mainly on soldiers who had been held in captivity by Native Americans, or the Indians. Right? Frank H. Severance, 1856 to 1931, a noted author-historian, defended Priest's style of writing, saying, "I'm aware that Priest is not altogether trustworthy as a historian, yet he concedes to his works a large amount of historic material, obtained at some pains from sources more or less authentic. Priest is least trustworthy in his more ambitious work, whereas his unpretentious pamphlets contain true narratives of individual undertakings in the Revolution, Indian captivities, and other pioneer experiences gathered by the writer direct from the hero whose adventures he wrote down without literary skill." So he wasn't a natural writer, was he? He wasn't a great writer, really. But also without apparent perversion or exaggeration. Priest recorded stories of Native American atrocities against white settlers that otherwise may have been forgotten. Well, they were trying to steal their land, drive them out, all that sort of stuff. These American Indians could see a threat, what they were going to do. Hunt the buffalo, kill all the buffalo, wipe it out, and the Indians can't eat, etc. They were quite onto it, quite aware of it. So these people did these atrocities against them. The army, 7th Cavalry, all that sort of military force, right? Custer and the 7th Cavalry, etc. Priest recorded stories of Native American atrocities against white settlers that otherwise may have been forgotten. They're just trying to protect their land. But they killed these farmsteaders, all this sort of stuff. It could have been someone else could have gone and wiped them out to take their land off them, to steal their land from under them. But they've got to blame these guys, right? They may have done it, but they're doing it for a specific reason, to protect their land, their buffalo, etc. That they saw that these people were wiping out in great numbers. However, his collection of stories was biased towards portrayals of Native Americans as violent. So he was probably exaggerating because he had a bias. He's racist, something like that. Criticisms and legacy. Critics dismiss Priest's books as compilations of poorly supported theories motivated by racism. Robert Silverberg, sounds very Jewish, an American author and editor best known for writing science fiction. He's a multiple winner of both Hugo and Nebula Awards, a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame, and a Grand Master of San Francisco. Priest was known for integrating many types of sources into his writings, seeking to create a semblance of authority and credibility for a popular audience. Priest's fantastic assertion persists today in the works of pseudoscience, that's half-assed science, pseudohistory, half-assed history, and New Age pop culture. A range of spiritual or religious practices and beliefs which rapidly grew in Western societies during the early 1970s. Its highly eclectic and unsystematic structure makes a precise definition difficult, even though many scholars consider it a religion. Isn't it strange how in those prior centuries these Europeans had these biases, these racisms against these natives, whether they were black or light brown or red skin or whatever, and yet centuries later they're the ones trying to get into their religions. Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, all this sort of stuff, right? Hebrew Israelite, all that sort of stuff. Trying to get into that. It's kind of weird. It's probably just different these days. You know, it's more modern and they're just drawn to that. They have no bias, no prejudice. They just like the idea of it. That's probably what it is. Comes down to. Priest was known for integrating many types of sources into his writings, seeking to create a semblance of authority and credibility for a popular audience. Priest's fantastic assertions persist today in the works of pseudoscience, pseudohistory, and New Age pop culture. So it's in their religions that they've entered into, maybe. In this respect, he can be considered a pioneer in popular but highly erroneous publishing. So he's a great figurehead for BS publishing writings. That's what it's saying there. The popularity of his works allowed Americans of his time to indulge in romantic fantasies about the past that encouraged their own racism. So it made it justifiable. Yeah? He boosted it. He said, yeah. Yeah, that's right. You're right. Think like that. That's good. Every reason to think like that. This justifies it. And so forth. So let's have a look at this book. We notice this. A subscription record from 1840. And it says, the abolitionists should have been hanged and quartered. We're going to make it bigger so you can see it. Reverend George Langdon of North Carolina in 1836 wrote to the editor of Zion Watchman. That's the original Jehovah's Witness publication, right? An anti-slavery publication. I, sir, would as soon be found in the ranks of the banditti as numbered with Arthur Tappan and his wanton coadjutors. Nothing is more appalling to my feelings as a man, contrary to my principles as a Christian, and repugnant to my soul as a minister, than the insidious proceedings of such men, abolitionists. August G.A. Chronicle. He, maybe that's a person's name, Amos dresser should be hung as high as heaven to rot on the gibbet until the wind whistled through his bones. The cry of the whole South should be death, instant death to the abolitionist wherever he is caught. Wow, that's an ancient publication. Very old. 1840. Someone's views against abolitionists. Let's make it bigger so you can read along with us. And maybe that's him there, or some sort of European. And then these are the, looks like a Mongol, African, and Native American. The four representations of mankind. Okay, European, it looks like Asian or mongrel, not mongrel, Mongol, African, and Native American. Bible defense of slavery, or the origin, history, and fortunes of the Negro race, as deduced from history, both sacred and profane. 3 natural relations, moral, mental, and physical, to the other races of mankind, contained, compared and illustrated their future destiny, predicted, etc. by Josiah Priest, A.M., author of American Antiquities and member of the Antiquarian Society of New York. A plan of national colonization, to which is added a plan of natural colonization. Adequate, make it bigger so you can see it. And all that may hereafter become free. Okay. A plan of national colonization adequate to the entire removal of the free blacks, and all that man hereafter became free in a manner harmonizing with the peace and well-being of both races. By Reverend W. S. Brown, MD, of Glasgow, Kentucky. 6th Stereotype Edition. A plan of national colonization adequate to the entire removal of the free blacks, and all that may hereafter become free in a manner harmonizing with the peace and well-being of both races, by Reverend W. S. Brown, MD, of Glasgow, Kentucky. Resize this so you can see. Entered according to Act of Congress on the 24th of February 1851 by Reverend W. S. Brown, MD, in the Clerk's Office of the United States District of Kentucky. So, it's Library of Congress was entered into that. Publisher's preface. In presenting the following work to the American public, no apologies are offered. We live under a government which tolerates liberty of thought and freedom of the press, and in this expression of our honest views and feelings upon a subject relating to the general welfare of the country, we are but exercising a right which belongs to every American citizen. Observation and experience has taught us that no man's opinions and principles gain favour with the world by empty apologies and useless excuses, but that they are generally received or rejected as they should be, according as they possess merit or demerit. It is a pleasing reflection that the age of prescription for opinion's sake is past. We trust never again to return, and that the unrestricted interchange of thought and sentiment which is permitted by the liberal genius of our free institutions has been productive of the most glorious results. As the rapid spread of civilization and Christianity, the general diffusion of light and knowledge, and the wonderful developments and triumphs of science and art in this our day and generation clearly demonstrate. Let the work progress. Let the little stone cut from the mountain's brow continue to roll onward, gathering strength with its progress. The result will be the full development of the illimitable powers of the human mind, and a final consummation of all the glorious events contemplated in the redemption of the world. The question is Slavery as it exists in the United States, justifiable, is one which at least admits of discussion. If it be in harmony with the immutable principles of truth and justice, and not a crime against humanity and a libel upon our holy religion, let it be so understood and practiced by our honest citizens, whose highest ambition consists in faithfully serving God and living in obedience to the laws of the country. If not, let the converse be established, and some judicious and practicable system of emancipation or liberation or freedom and removal be provided, and we maintain without the fear of successful refutation that a majority of the enlightened slaveholders of the United States with characteristic promptitude and Christian philanthropy will liberate their slaves, or free them, let them go, release them, right, and contribute to their removal and future support and protection. So they say, okay, now you're free, you're liberated, you can go, do whatever, move on, and we'll give you support and protection. All that is wanted in the final adjustment of this vexed question is light and knowledge, a fair and candid interchange of thoughts and opinions, a faithful and true exposition of the principles involved in the relation of master and slave. Convince the slaveholder that this relation is compatible with Christianity and republicanism, he stands ready to abandon it, regardless of the sacrifice. His mind is not sealed against the impressive teaching of truth and reason, nor his heart seared against the moving influences of pure benevolence and true Christian charity. But hitherto, the agitation of this question has been altogether one-sided and confined, mainly to those in whose action upon the subject neither right, reason, nor justice were involved. They have been justly regarded as busybodies and disturbers of the public peace. The question, like the institution itself, is purely of a sectional or local character, involving only the interests of the citizens of those states where slavery exists. So it's all about them and their money making from their backs, their hard labour, even under those harsh conditions that they put them through, and their profits. It's all about them. Cheap labour to make them wealthy. For it to be discussed and agitated, and the motives and characters of the slaveholder to be assailed and calumniated by the citizens of other states as illiberal and anti-republican, and savours of ignorance and corruption, or of both combined. But nevertheless, this unnatural warfare against truth and justice, against law and liberty, has been continued until the peace and prosperity of a great nation are much disturbed, and our glorious confederacy well nigh dissolved, until many of our best citizens and purest patriots have begun almost to call in question the honesty of the honoured dead, the fathers of the Republic, and to look with distrust and suspicion upon those time-honoured institutions which have commanded the world's admiration, and by which are secured too as the richest blessings of civil and religious liberty. It is not time then that the South should begin to defend herself against the aggressions of those time-serving votaries of error and fanaticism, and show to the world that her peculiar policy and institutions are in harmony with the genius of republicanism and the spirit of true Christianity. Believing that such is her true policy, and that this proposition is much more consistent and reasonable, as well as more easily established than its converse, we have been induced to give publicity to the following pages in vindication of Southern rights and institutions. Although we believe that the institution of slavery received the sanction of the Almighty in the patriarchal age, that would be in Noahic age, that it was incorporated into the only national constitution which ever emanated from God, or came from God, originated from God, that its legality was recognised and its reliable duties regulated by our Saviour. So Jesus promoted that. That's what they're saying. When upon the earth, that it was established in wisdom. He's promulgating, or he's saying that Jesus said, yeah, it's all good. You can have slaves, you can beat them, you can mistreat them for your profit, or that sort of stuff. No. That it was established in wisdom and has been wisely continued through all ages and handed down to us in mercy. See, what they're trying to base it on is Jesus saying, slaves, honour your masters, obey your master, all that sort of stuff, right? If you happen to be a slave, okay, or a servant of, that's probably what he's talking about, that the relation of master and servant harmonise strictly with the best interests of the inferior or African race in particular, and securing to him that protection and support which he is native imbecility, or he's got no, or low intelligence of intellect, disqualifies him from securing for himself. Yet do we most cordially reprobate any abuse of the relation by the superior power, or that superior race, right? Them being the superior authority, or any, or maybe it's talking about God, undue exercise of authority, by the matter over the slave, holding it to be an unwavering, uncompromising truth that a fearful retribution is in reservation for all the violators of the wisely established decrees of God in this respect. There are certain obligations and duties which every master owes to a slave that are as binding and indispensable as are the duties and obligations which he owes to his God, his country, or himself. So they're saying, yeah, okay, there's rights and wrongs, how you treat your slaves, etc. You should be doing this according to the Bible, according to God, all that sort of stuff. But they had people that beat them, mistreated them, treated them like dirt, etc., etc. So they weren't following those rules, were they? These obligations. These discharged in accordance with the will of high heaven, and the mere fact of being a slaveholder will not, in our humble judgment, debar a man from an entrance into the house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So saying that it's not going to stop them from getting into the kingdom of heaven, because they were had these slaves and they did all those things in them, right? Okay. They're totally twisting what the scripture says about the difference between servants, Jewish servants, those who owed a debt and were employed, they worked and paid off their debt with someone else's debt, but they had luxury, they had clothing, they had beds to sleep in, they had a roof over their head, they had food, they had drink, etc., etc. Whereas the foreign, non-Jewish, Gentile, Goyim, who was captured through war, perhaps, was a slave and had basically no rights. There's a difference there. Again, check out the scriptures. Read it properly. Our individual views on the subject of a national system of colonisation as applicable to the free black population of the United States may be regarded at first sight perhaps as somewhat novel, something new, etc., and wanting in the essential qualities of age and precedent or experience. But the reader may rest assured. So it's a new thing, and you've got to go through trial and error and all this sort of stuff. Perhaps as somewhat novel and wanting in the essential qualities of age and precedent or experience, but the reader may be rest assured that there have been submitted to the inspection of many of our prominent citizens and leading statesmen and have received their unqualified approval. So these guys come out and check it out and they say, yeah, okay, this person seems to be okay, you're treating them okay, they're doing fine, there's nothing funny going on, yeah, okay, or yeah, okay, we approve of whatever you're doing, we've got no problem there, carry on, without exception. The existence of free blacks in any community, whether free or slave, is universally admitted to be an evil of no minor consideration. Their removal, therefore, is a matter deeply affecting the interest and well-being of both races. Their present number and natural increase places this beyond the reach of individual enterprise. The resources of the general government must, therefore, be brought into requisition in the removal of this as well as any other evil of a general or national character. However this may be done in this case in a manner harmonising with the true interests of both races is a theme certainly not unworthy the candid consideration of any American citizen. In the work of Mr. Priest on the subject of slavery as it relates to the Negro or African race, examined in light of circumstances, history and the Holy Scriptures, with an account of the black man's colour, causes of stats of servitude, and traces of his character, as well in ancient as in modern times, with scriptures on abolitionism. The reader may confidently expect to find a work of great research and ability, one of deep interest, and well worthy his candid perusal. The author has sought in the oracles of God, in authentic history, and in the analogies of nature, the key to the mystery of the degradation through the unchronicled ages of the past of the Negro race. The fact of the inferiority and consequent subordination of the black race to the white, being in accordance with the will of the supreme ruler, or God, the Godhead of the universe, is not like a mathematical problem susceptible of absolute demonstration. Yet we think that the readers of this work will acknowledge that the author has let in a flood of light upon this deeply interesting subject through the myths in which ignorance and misguided sympathy has enveloped it. Himself a northern man, prejudiced as he admits in his early education against the institution, the conclusion at which he arrives, supported as they are by the most powerful train of reasoning, cannot fail to check the suicidal progress of that pseudo-philanthropy. So it's half-assed philanthropy. Why kept modern abolitionism, is that supposed to be well kept? That's a strange word. Preface. Then a knowledge of the races and nations of man who have peopled the globe since it was created, there can be no subject more interesting. With a view to an elucidation of this description, we present the work before us, or this particular author does, in which an attempt is made to give, in some measure, a history of the origin, character, and fortunes of the Negro portion of mankind. In pursuit of this object, we hope there needs no apology, because we have found it necessary to resort to the Holy Scriptures for much important information which relates to our design, as it is well known that these parts of that book, which were written by Moses, are the eldest writings of the human race now extant, and relate to the very first operation of the human race after the flood. So this person is saying that Moses wrote the scriptures, Exodus, Deuteronomy, etc., when Jews admit that no, he didn't write it. It's attributed to him because it's their traditional, or their tradition, or their custom to add a name to any of these writings, these scrolls, etc. So they attribute it to Moses. How could Moses write of his death after he's dead? Go figure that one out. As corroboratory of the development of that miraculous book, we have also resorted to ancient and modern history, to travels, narratives, and which go to aid us in research. So they've gone all over to seek approval, probably, for their slave trade, to having slaves, and what they were doing, and how they're profiting from it. As to the origin of the Negro man, we have in our cognitions we collect the several curious opinions relative to the subject, which we have thought proper to present on account of their wild and extravagant character as follows. So they've come across other people that have that opinion, about the Negroes. Some have queried whether the mother of the first Negro man might not have been frightened by some hideous black monster of the antediluvian woods, as in the first ages of the world there were many terrible beasts of the wilderness roaming about whose races are now extinct. We actually read another book where Eve wasn't tempted by a servant, she was tempted by a first black race. They'd done something, they'd fallen away from God, right, out of God's presence, and God had told her and Adam, don't touch that tree, or don't take the fruit off that tree and eat it, etc., etc. But this supposed tempter came along and said, didn't Adam say that? Don't touch the tree? God didn't actually say that? Isn't that what, that's what your husband Adam said? She said, oh yeah, he said, yeah, don't touch the tree. So this being touches this tree, says, see, look at that. Nothing happened. A bit like George Carlin, right? Strike me dead, God, if you're real, zap me, and it never happened. See, there's no God. Okay, so this basically touches the tree, and nothing happens. So he says, oh, okay. So she touches the tree, and that's that sin she's committed, right? and then he gets her to take the fruit and eat the fruit, and then she passes it on to Adam. That sort of thing. Just as a different version. Okay, trying to blame the darker race people. Okay, tempters made that Eve and Adam sin with this sort of stuff rather than servant. Try to blame it on them. Some have queried whether the mother of the first Negro man might have not been frightened by some hideous black monster of the antediluvian woods. It's pre-flood, right? As in the first ages of the world, there were many terrible beasts of the wilderness roaming about whose races are now extinct. So it's not talking about animals there. Maybe it is about those animal species, but here it's saying about whose races are now extinct. It could be like when you look at the Origin of Species book, and some like Ray Comfort, the Christian in America, says, "Oh, that shows that Charles Darwin is racist." But no, he's talking about species of flowers, plants, vegetation, etc. He's not being a racist and saying, superior Caucasians to these lower, darker, mixed blood relations, races, right? He's not saying that. They've taken it out of context. There is one creature which existed then and is not yet extinct, whose appearance in its native haunts is very frightful to behold, and this is the black orang-outang. So he's trying to say that these African people were probably apes or something, right? Of which animal there are individuals known to have attained the enormous height. Is he trying to relate that orangutan to these darker races? Or then maybe they got a fright from this particular very tall orangutan, black in colour, of 7 feet. Wouldn't that be a yeti? Covered entirely with shiny black hair. The strange effect of fright on the offspring of mothers is a well-known phenomenon in the physiological history of man. Thus, as some have supposed, the Negro race was produced forming an entire new class of human beings and distinguished from the nature, colour and character of the parents by a fright of the mother. So was he saying the mother got a fright from this black orangutan? Not necessarily a black person. It's not referring to a black person as an orangutan, but this orangutan that was 7 feet tall in that antediluvian period snuck up behind her and gave her a fright, and she said, "Oh no, I'll be scared by this monster," and looked like this. Others have seemed to believe that in the very first ages of the planet and long before the creation of Adam, there existed a race of animals having a resemblance to man. Okay, is it saying apes? Giant apes? As has the orangutan, but of gigantic stature, yeah, it is, as well as power, dwelling in communion with other beasts and monsters of that time. Ooh. From this family of animals, it has been supposed that the Negro race was derived. Oh my gosh. So they're saying that the African race were orangutans. This guy is on some wacky trip. And it was brought forward by the continual mutations of nature. So this is probably someone with evolution ideas, beliefs, passing from one change to another in pursuit of maturity with all things else, arriving at last to the highest point as exhibited in the presence of the black or Negro nations. It has also been believed that at a very early period of time, some community of men have been so situated in relation to climate, food and other circumstances as to have been changed from the original stamp of complexion and character to that of perfect blacks, thus originating the Negro family of man. So what's he trying to say there? That these original Caucasian white people for some reason turned black? Which originated in the original Negro family of man. Some have imagined that the origin of the race was a disease of the skin, which being an incurable nature, formed at length a radical character, and thus produced this people. Many have believed that there was at first as many fathers and mothers created as there are now different races of men, from whom have descended the red, the white, and the black, the brown, and the yellow tribes of the human race, discarding the account given in the scriptures of there having been but one pair of human beings created. Okay, well, looking at the Tav Asheret, the original ancient very old Tav Asheret, Berita, Bereshit in Hebrew, it actually talks of God creating pre-Adamic being in his image and his likeness, not from the ground, not molded from the ground as the human being, the more spiritual being, Adam, was created. This is Genesis 1:26 or 27 in the Berita, translated from the original Tav Asheret or Aramaic, hand copied by scribes and monks in Ur-Hai, now Odessa, modern Turkey, around 800 BCE. He got hold of those original manuscripts from the original Apostolic Church of the East, or the restored Church of the East, from a high priest, and he translated those into the nearest English equivalent using a certain method. Because remember, that's a long dead, no longer written, no longer spoken, or very rarely spoken language. So he had to take the root words of the modern, or the modern vernacular, possibly the Syriac, to do that and translate it into the nearest English equivalent. Right? So in a sense, yeah, there were beings before Adam and Eve. Archaeologists, etc., has proven that there was cave dwellers, hunters, gatherers, by the remains, the bones, etc., found in certain places like Neander, Germany, the different caves and so forth. There were many fakes done, like people try to put a monkey head on a human skeleton, all this sort of stuff, and made out, oh yeah, this is a prehistoric man, and this proves the evolution that man came from a monkey, all this sort of stuff, and yeah, they all got busted. As it did with these dinosaurs in the museums, try to add wings to them, all this sort of stuff. Didn't have these parts. They said, oh, I've got a complete dinosaur here you are, right? No, this dinosaur's got wings and it's got chicken feet. What's going on? Many have believed that there was at first as many fathers and mothers created as there are now different races of men, from which have descended the red, the white, and black, the brown, and the yellow tribes of the human race, discarding the account given in the scriptures of there having been but one pair of human beings created. Yeah, that's in your modern, that'll be in your latter ones, in 1611 afterwards, right? You probably read a King James version or something like that, getting it from there. Others have imagined that the mark set upon Cain by the divine power for the crime of homicide or murdering his brother Abel was that of jet, which not only changed the colour of his body but extended to the blood and the whole of his physical being, thus originating the Negro race, a remnant of which they suppose by means of some craft or rather outrode the flood, anchoring on some lofty mountain, subsisting on the floating carcasses of the drowned animals until the earth was dried again. Where does this guy get his facts from? So the whole world is totally flooded, everything on it dies, but a Negro or a black person or whatever is rowing around on dead people or dead animals. He survives on top of the water for how many days? 40 days and 40 nights. This guy has one hell of an imagination. Well, he's saying that other people are saying this sort of stuff, so it may not be his actual belief. Yeah, it might not be coming from his mouth. Thus many have mused on the subject of the origin of the Negro race, but we reject all these schemes as the baseless hallucinations of visionaries. visionaries, or visionaries. Even the mooted and equally absurd problem that climate or any other contingency became the origin of that people. Well, we just stated earlier that these people, like Noah's descendants, migrated to somewhere else, and they went to a hot geographical location, say like Africa or down the Nile or somewhere, and the sun's beating down on them all day, every day, and your skin's got to handle that heat, so it evolves over time. It adapts so they don't get the skin disease or whatever, or get so hot that they just burn up or something like that. All that sort of stuff. Thus many have mused on the subject of the origin of the Negro race, but we reject all these schemes as the baseless hallucinations of visionaries. Even the mooted and equally absurd problem that climate or any other contingency became the origin of that people, and affirmed that a cause of an entire race, an entire different description from all these gave birth to the race, an account of which we shall give in this work. So any scientific finding today he would reject. A skin specialist, etc., that would say, here's the evidence that proves itself evident, here's the established facts, that the skin would have had to evolve over a certain period of time. They would say, no, it's rubbish. As to the mental character of the black nations considered collectively, we have found them in all ages since the appearance on the earth of but small accounts when compared with the other races of men, the red and white. In publishing their opinions as presented in this work, they have been moved thereto by the operation of conflicting principles as held by abolitionists and anti-abolitionists throughout the entire United States, believing that light was necessary in order to learn the truth respecting the people in question, namely the Negro race. We're also anxious to ascertain, these authors of this book, right, this Josiah Priest, etc., we're also anxious to ascertain the cause of this class of mankind being enslaved in the low and degraded sense of the word. As to the history of the black portion of the human race, it has occupied the pens of more writers than one, on which account we feel that we are not alone in this attempt. Like-minded, likewise, right? And you'll always find them sympathetic to your claims, your cause. Also that we have advanced some new and not uninteresting opinions with respect to the time and the occasion of the production of the first Negro man. Together with an account of the origin of this people, we have not forgotten to inquire something respecting the native mental abilities of the race and whether created equal in that and other particulars with other men. We have also had something to say about exalting them in this country to political and social equality with the other citizens of the United States, and whether were the whites and blacks to become amalgamated, it would be a desirable object with many other matters of interest. We have found the history of this race somewhat of a difficult character to describe, as it is far more hidden and obscure than the history of either the red or white race. Yet we believe that some progress in this respect is made in the work. Thus, with but few prefatory remarks, we submit our opinions, believing that which we have advanced to be indubitable, however repugnant to the conception of many who fancy they see in the Negro's mind the germs of a prodigious mental power, notwithstanding all the evidence to the contrary, which has witnessed against him for thousands of years, showing that that a pool of darkness and obscurity not occasioned by the acts of the influence of the other races has rested on the whole being of this people, induced by a higher power than that of man. As was the deep when nature first was made, and earth's foundation in the waters laid, when darkness reigned the realm of ancient night, when God set forth his word and there was light, so is the race of Ham a darkling sea, which now invites the truth that light may be, over which if we have sent a single ray, then we have gained our aim and look for the day. The author, that was that, Josiah Priest. Index, first section, second section, and so it's written a comment here, but covered by that page fold. Third edition. Oh, sorry, third section. It continues. People have written notes here. It's probably talking about Moses' wife being an Ethiopian, proofs of her being a negress and of the race of Ham. Statement of the prophet Jeremiah that Ethiopians were black. If the three sons of Noah were all of the same complexion, the complexion then follows certain results fatal to the veracity of the scriptures. Hercules was Nimrod, the grandson of Noah, and the origin of all the fabled Herculeses of the early nations. Some curious tradition of African authority respecting their own origin, with many other curious matters. And wife of Ham and others. Wife of Ham and the wives of the other sons of Noah, who they were, respecting straight-haired black men, the cause Ham, the father having been woolly-headed, Egyptian mummies, one man only between Noah and Adam, etc., etc. Sixth section, proof from the scriptures that the curse of Noah upon the race of Ham as a judicial act is endorsed by the law of Moses. Comparative view of all the orders of servants among the Jews as the hired Hebrew servant, the bought Hebrew servant, and the voluntary Hebrew servant, and a Negro or Canaanite slave. Okay, so these are non-Jews. Okay, so there's a difference there. You have a Hebrew servant, a bought Hebrew servant, or the voluntary Hebrew servant, because they like that person. They decide, oh yeah, I'll work for him, I'll be his cook or whatever. Okay, and there's a difference there between them, servant, and the Negro or Canaanite slave. Remarks on the subject of the strangers of whom the Jews might take usury or payment, and of whom might not take usury, might not take payment, and so forth. And then down the bottom here, enslaving, what's this? Proofs that the Hebrews bought and sold Negro slaves under the sanction of the law, or is that the Torah, the book of instruction? Even going to Africa for that purpose. Enslaving of the persons of the Amalekites under the eye of Moses. Slaves of the patriarchs bought with money. A curious query of abolitionists answered with many other matters. He's making all these claims in these different sections of his book. Arguments and positions of abolitionists, favouring a belief that the scriptures recognise the Negro man as being equal with the other races, all men are created equal. In point of blood, and otherwise refuted. Mark of Cain, what it was, no black man or Negroes before the flood except one. Difference between and that's the one that floated on the dead corpses or carcasses of the animals that died because of the flood, and floated around for 40 days, according to this author and what he's heard. Difference between the secretive power of the blood of white and Negro men. Evidences that the Supreme Being puts a higher estimate on white than on black. What a load of garbage. As colours or complexions. Consent to this difference by the blacks themselves, though incidental. La 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 la. 8th section. Woman of Egypt, marriage, African Negroes. Dreadful practices of the woman of Egypt, included in this section. Curious reason of the Jewish rabbi why the dogs would not eat the head and hands of Jezebel. Horrid customs of the African Negroes, etc., etc. 9th section. Dealing with or dealing in slaves. Pretended mental equality of the Negro race with white men refuted as held by abolitionists. Comparative view of the races as to their doings in the world. Proves that the ancient Egyptians nor any of the Negro nations were not the authors of either arts or sciences. proves that the arts and sciences comprehending a knowledge of letters were known before the flood and in the house of Noah and by the first patriarchs, that would be Abraham, etc. Curious discoveries made in the foundations of the Tower of Babel by Sir Robert Kerr Porter, and so forth. Down the bottom, the cruelties to their slaves. Meanings of the Negro spirit, their cruelties to their slaves, with many other curious matters. Section 10th or 10th section. Murdering of children among them. What's this? Anticipation of some men that amalgamation will finally become universal, so as to put down slavery in this way. Slavery among the African Negroes before they knew white men, stealing each other, murdering of children among them, many facts respecting the near approach of various Negro tribes to the form of the orangutan and all this sort of stuff. 11th section. Views of St. Paul. 12th to 15th section. No comments on this. Anyway, this is talking about Moses. God striking Miriam, the sister of Moses, with leprosy because she found fault with her brother for having married an Ethiopian woman, overturned and shown to be blasphemous, and so forth. First section, history of the Negro race. Origin and history of the Negro race. First section, complexion of the appearance of the human race. Kind of earth man was made of power of the Hebrew language in giving names. Adam and Eve, both called Adam by the Creator. Complexion of the antediluvians. Curious chronology of the holy seed from Adam to Jacob, the immediate head of the Jewish tribes. The opinions of some that Adam was created black. Refuted. Personal appearances of Adam and Eve in paradise before the fall, with many other curious matters. Okay, the truth here, Adam and Eve both called Adam because Eve came from Adam, from man, so she was considered Adam in that sense. That we may elucidate the subjects alluded to on the title page of this work, it is of importance to ascend very high toward the beginning of time in this investigation, even up to the creation of the first human pair. By this method and this only do we hope to arrive at length to a knowledge of the desired objects, to ascertain the true origin of the Negro or African race at the very threshold of the work. It is exceedingly appropriate, as without such a discovery we shall appear to wander where no light shines, to illume the way amidst the mazes of the ancient times. How often do we hear the questions like the following: from whence came the Ethiopian or black man? Who was his father? Did he spring from Adam or some other race? Can it be that from one and the same source the white, black and red portions of mankind proceeded with all the hues and shades of complexion which marked the human race? If so, is it not exceedingly mysterious that there is not now, nor never has been, the occurrence of a variety so marked and distinctive as is black, white and red, proceeding from the same parents naturally? Well, there is actually information from sacredtext.com that mitochondrial DNA proves that that we're all Africans, and there's a mitochondrial Eve where supposedly all people came from. Go check it out. Sacredtext.com. You can put the link below so you can go have a look at it. It's under the African section. 60,000 years ago, there's like a amount of 100 people or less. They are from Africa. So that statement says mitochondrial DNA proves that we all came from Africa, etc. Whereas the biblical scriptures, the ancient Tower of Ashtoreth, the modern Bible, etc., say it all began in the Garden of Eden, in somewhere in the Near East, Mesopotamia, Iraq or Iraq, Iran, around that area, by the rivers, Gishon, Pishon, Havila, did it rose. The Gishon, the Pishon, the Euphrates, and the other one. It all came from the Garden of Eden was there apparently, so it all started there. But then we have a video where this guy actually says, look at the Israeli tourist board information, and it says that all countries were one giant landmass. So Israel, where Israel is now, that was part of Africa until the tectonic plates shifted, they rubbed together, they caused the earthquake, they caused volcanic eruption, molten lava, all this sort of stuff, and they separated. So you had these seas, these canals, like Suez Canal, etc., the Red Sea in between, etc. So yeah, Israel way back then, according to the Israeli Antiquities or Tourism Board that this particular Pan-African guy was explaining about. We have a video on that, you can probably find it and put it as the end screen so you can look at that as well. Stated. So yeah, this is very, very racist, biased, prejudice from this guy, Josiah Priest. And he bases it on the Hebrew language, translated. And he says here it is proper to inquire what then was the complexion of the two first of the human race, Adam and Eve, and the antediluvian world with their offspring. In relation to this extremely curious as well as interesting subject, we shall refer to a very ancient and a very learned historian, namely Flavius Josephus, who says in his works on the antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, page 12, that Adam, the first man, was created red. Go have a look at that and verify that it actually does. Red or ruddy. Because the soil was red, right? The following are his words. God took dust from the ground and formed man and inserted in him a spirit and a soul. This man was called Adam, which in the Hebrew tongue signifies one that is red or ruddy, because he is formed of red earth, compounded together. For of that kind is virgin or true earth. It's never been touched. Okay, this is way before Adam's curse and the ground was cursed because of sin and weeds popped up, all that sort of stuff. So maybe he didn't have weeds then. Weeds didn't pop up amongst the vegetation. Wow, amazing. This kind of earth which Josephus calls virgin or pure earth was no doubt of a very peculiar character and appearance, or he would not have called it pure or virgin earth, in distinction from all the other earths of the globe, of which it is said that there are 9. How this man came by a knowledge of this circumstance we cannot tell, except he derived it from the term Adam, or form a tradition of the patriarchs arising out of that circumstance, his creation from red earth and handed down from the house of Noah. For this very reason, doubtless it was written by Moses. Moses never wrote anything apparently, but everything was attributed to him, as far as we know. Genesis version 2, that God called the two parents of the human race by but one name, which was that of Adam, in which name was comprehended as well as their natures as their complexion. God did not give the first woman the name of Eve. It was Adam who did this, when he saw that she was to become the mother of all the human race. Adam was the name which God gave to the woman as well as to the man at first, as shown above from the text of Moses, as we already explained. She came from man, she was of man, from man. So Adam says, oh yeah, or the scriptures say, yeah, she's also Adam for that particular reason, because of that particular reason. The circumstances should not be allowed to pass till it shall have made its due impression upon the mind of the reader, which is as follows. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. So which particular verse is that? Is that Genesis 1:27 or Genesis 2:7? that he's taking it from. Probably 2:7. In accordance with the statement of Josephus in rendering a reason why God called the two first human beings by but one name, and that name being Adam, or the red man and woman, we find that the Hebrew language establishes that the words Adam, Adamah, Adami, and Adma have all a similar meaning. First, Adam, as above, signifies earthly man. Red. Second, Adama signifies red earth or blood. Third, Adami signifies my man, red, earthy, human. Fourth, Adma signifies earthy, red, or bloody. All of which words are the same class and spring from the same root, which was Adam, signifying red or copper colour. From a view of this fact, it is difficult to account for the reason of the name of the first man and woman unless they were created red instead of white or black, as it is well known that the Hebrew language is governed in its power of naming visible existences as of animals, fowls, fishes, by their appearance or natures, and frequently by both, as in the case of the name Adam, which not only represented the hue of his skin, but that also of his intellectual existence or human nature. Titus, that says thus. Thus the Jewish historian, Josephus, as well as the genius of the Hebrew language, furnishes us with a clue, like the golden thread in the labyrinth of the subterranean palace of ancient Thebes, leading to the right conclusion on this subject, namely that Adam with all the antediluvian race were red or a copper-coloured people. But on this subject there is other testimony corroborative of the above, though but incidentally afforded, and yet is of the highest possible authority. This evidence is found in the writings of Moses. Again, we stated that Moses didn't write anything. It was attributed to him by the Jews, who admitted to it that they had to put names to their writings. It's part of their traditional custom. Jews have admitted that. In the book of Genesis, chapters 5 and 11, in this book is written by a competent hand a brief yet perfect history of the cosmogony of the earth, as well as narrative of the births and deaths of the patriarchs from the beginning of to the time in which he lived, a lapse of years consisting of 255 and about 1481 years before the birth of Josephus, who was a mere lad at the time of Christ's crucifixion, who was actually adopted by the Flavians. So that's why he was called Flavius Josephus or Josephus Flavius. This incidental evidence is in relation to the belief that Adam was created red, as afforded by Moses, in tracing the genealogical descent of one of the sons of Adam, namely that of Seth, from his father down to the patriarch Jacob, who was the immediate progenitor of the 12 tribes of the house of Israel. Now, as the Jews are red or a dark copper-coloured race in their pure and unamalgamated condition, aids in proving that Adam was also of the same complexion, because Seth, an immediate son of Adam and Eve, was the direct progenitor of the Hebrew or Jewish people, commonly called the lineage of the Holy Seed. Well, don't know about that one. Does it say in Genesis that the son replaced by God for Adam and Eve, named by Eve as another, because she states God gave her another in replacement of the one that Cain killed, Abel, so she called him Seth. It doesn't say there he was Jewish, or he was Hebrew Israelite, or he was this, he was that. It doesn't say he was this, it doesn't say he was that, it doesn't say he was white, black, green, yellow, whatever. It doesn't tell you that. It may say that in the actual Hebrew language, if you are a native speaker and you know that it does. That's like saying Nephilim means fallen angels. When you go look at the actual meaning of the word, it says, shock, surprise, ogre. It means ogre. So those Nephilim, etc., wandering around, these giants, etc., they were like ogres. Nothing to do with fallen angels or sexual reproduction, intercourse with human woman, and producing offspring of fallen angels. These were the